Wagwan, making it back, making it back to. We are now currently on chapter 26, the title "Design Principles," the studio of Job and Ive. Um, Design principles. I'm assuming that they had a process that they used to come up with their designs. I guess just like think about that just off first glance. I'm curious, like how much of success is actually designed. Um, with that being said, welcome back to day 29 of becoming more well read. Um, Gonna hop right into it. Page 340. Johnny Ive. When Jobs gathered his top management for a pep talk just after he became ICEO in September 1997, sitting in the audience was a sensitive and passionate 30-year-old Brit who was head of the company's design team. Jonathan Ive, known to all as Johnny, was planning to quit. He was sick of the company's focus on profit maximization rather than product design. Jobs' talk led him to reconsider. I remember very clearly Steve announcing that our goal is not just to make money, but to make great products. I have recalled the decisions you make based on that philosophy are fundamentally different from the ones we had been making at Apple. Ivan Jobs would soon forge a bond that would lead to the greatest industrial design collaboration of their era. Ive grew up in Chingford, a town on the northeast edge of London. His father was a silversmith who taught at the local college. He's a fantastic craftsman, I've recalled. His Christmas gift to me would be one day of his time in his college workshop during the Christmas break when no one else was there, helping me make whatever I dreamed of. The only condition was that Johnny had to draw by hand what they planned to make. I always understood the beauty of things made by hand. I came to realize that what was really important was the care that was put into it. What I really despise is when I sense some carelessness in a product. I've enrolled in Newcastle Polytechnic and spent his spare time in summers working at a design consultancy. One of his creations was a pen with a little ball on top that was fun to fiddle with. It helped give the owner a playful, emotional connection to the pen. For his thesis, he designed a microphone and earpiece in purest white plastic to communicate with hearing impaired kids. His flat was filled with foam models he had made to help him perfect the design. He also designed an ATM machine and a curved phone, both of which won awards from the Royal Society of Arts. Unlike some designers, he didn't just make beautiful sketches. He also focused on how engineering and inner components would work. He had an epiphany in college when he was able to design on a Macintosh. I discovered the Mac and felt I had a connection with the people who were making this product, he recalled. I suddenly understood what a company was or was supposed to be. After graduation, I've helped to build a design firm in London, Tangerine, which got a consulting contract with Apple. In 1992, he moved to Cupertino to take a job in the Apple design department. He became the head of the department in 1996, the year before Jobs returned, but wasn't happy. Emilio had little appreciation for design. There wasn't that feeling of putting care into a product because we were trying to maximize the money we made. I've said all they wanted from his designers was a model of what something was supposed to look like on the outside, and then engineers would make it as cheap as possible. I was about to quit. When Jobs took over and gave his pep talk, I've decided to stick around. But Jobs at first looked around for a world class designer from the outside. He talked to Richard Sapper, who designed the IBM ThinkPad, and Giorgetto Giorgiaro, who designed the Ferrari 250 and the Maserati Ghibli. But then he took a tour of Apple's design studio and bonded with the affable, eager, and very earnest Ive. We discussed approaches to forms and materials. I've recalled we were on the same wavelength. I suddenly understood. I suddenly understood why I loved the company. I reported, at least initially, to John Rubinstein, whom Jobs had brought in to the head brought in to head the hardware division, but he developed a direct and unusually strong relationship with Jobs. They began to have lunch together regularly, and Jobs would end his day by dropping by Ives' design studio for a chat. Johnny had a special status, said Lauren Powell. He would come by our house, and our families became close. Steve is never intentionally wounding to him, but most people in Steve's lives are replaceable, but not Johnny. Jobs described to me his respect for Ives. The difference that Johnny has made not only at Apple but in the world is huge. He's a wickedly intelligent person in all ways. He understands business concepts, marketing concepts. He picks stuff up just like that. Click. He understands what we do at our core better than anyone. If I had a spiritual partner at Apple, it's Johnny. Johnny and I, Johnny and I think up most of the products together and then pull others in and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" He gets the big picture as well as the most infinite, infinite, infinitesimal, infinitesimal, most infinitesimal details. I gotta look at that one about each product, and he understands that Apple is a product company. He's not just a designer. That's why he works directly for me. He has more operational power than anyone else at Apple except me. There's no one who can tell him what to do or to butt out. That's the way I set it up. Like most designers, I've enjoyed analyzing the philosophy and the step-by-step thinking that went into a particular design. For Jobs, the process was more intuitive. He would point to models and sketches he liked and dump on the ones he didn't. Ive would then take the cues and develop the concept Jobs blessed. Ive was a fan of the German industrial designer Dieter Rams, who worked for the electronics firm Braun. Rams preached the gospel of less but better, Wigner aber besser, and likewise Jobs and Ive wrestled with each new design to see how much they could simplify it. Ever since Apple's first brochure proclaimed simplicity as the ultimate sophistication. Jobs had aimed for the simplicity that comes from conquering complexities, not ignoring them. It takes a lot of hard work, he said, to make something simple, to truly understand the underlying challenges and come up with elegant solutions. In Ive, Jobs met his soulmate in the quest for true rather than surface simplicity. Sitting in his design studio, Ive described his philosophy. Why do we assume that simple is good? Because with physical products, we have to feel we can dominate them. As you bring order to complexity, you find a way to make the product defer to you. Simplicity isn't just a visual style, it's not just minimalism or the absence of clutter. It involves digging through the depth of the complexity. To be truly simple, you have to go really deep. For example, to have no screws on something, you can end up having a product that is so convoluted and so complex. The better way is to go deeper with the simplicity to understand everything about it and how it's manufactured. You have to deeply understand the essence of a product in order to be able to get rid of the parts that are not essential, not essential, essential, essential. That was the fundamental principle Jobs and Ive shared. Design was not just about what a product looked like on the surface. It had to reflect the product's essence. In most people's vocabulary, design means veneer, Jobs told Fortune shortly after retaking the reins at Apple. But to me, nothing could be further from the meaning of design. Design is the fundamental soul of a man made creation that ends up expressing itself in successive outer layers. As a result, the process of designing a product at Apple was integrally related to how it would be engineered and manufactured. I've described one of Apple's Power Macs. We wanted to get rid of anything other than what was absolutely essential, he said. To do so required total collaboration between the engineers, the product developers, the engineers, I mean, between designers, the product developers, the engineers, and the manufacturing team. We kept going back to the beginning again and again. Do we need that part? Can we get it to perform the function of the other four parts? The connection between the design of a product is essence, and its manufacturing was illustrated for Jobs and Ive when they were traveling in France and went into a kitchen supply store. Ive picked up a knife he admired, but then put it down in disappointment. Jobs did the same. We both noticed a tiny bit of glue between the handle and the blade, Ive recalled. They talked about how the knife's good design had been ruined by the way it was manufactured. We don't like to think of our knives as being glued together, I've said. Steve and I care about things like that, which ruin the purity and distract from the essence of something like a utensil. And we think alike about how products should be made to look pure and seamless. At most other companies, engineering tends to drive the outer design elements of a product. The engineers set forth their specifications and requirements, and the designers then come up with cases and shells that will accommodate them. For Jobs, the process tended to work the other way. In the early days of Apple, Jobs had approved the design of the case of the original Macintosh, and the engineers had to make their boards and components fit. After he was forced out, the process at Apple reverted to being engineer driven. Before Steve came back, engineers would say, "Hey, here are the guts, processor, hard drive," and then it would go back to the designers to put it in a box," said Apple's marketing chief Phil Schiller. "When you do it that way, you come up with awful products." But when Jobs returned and forced his bond with Ive, the balance was again tilted toward the designers. Steve kept impressing on us that the design was integral to what would make us great, says Chiller. Design once again dictated the engineering, not just vice versa. On occasion, this could backfire, such as when Jobs and Ive insisted on using a solid piece of stainless steel for the edge of a iPhone 4, even when the engineers worried that it would compromise reception. But usually, the distinctiveness of his designs for the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad would set Apple apart and lead to his triumphs in the years after Jobs returned. Inside the studio, the design studio where Johnny Ive reigns, on the ground floor of two Infinite Loop on the Apple campus, is shielded by tinted windows and a heavy clad locked door. Just inside is a glass booth reception desk where two assistants guard access. Even high level Apple employees are not allowed in without special permission. Most of my interviews with Johnny Ive for this book were held elsewhere, but one day in 2010, he arranged for me to spend an afternoon touring the studio and talking about how he and Jobs collaborate there. To the left of the entrance is a bullpen of desks with young designers. To the right is the cavernous main room with six long steel tables for displaying and playing with works in progress. Beyond the main room is a computer aided design studio filled with workstations that leads to a room with molding machines to turn what's on the screens into foam models. Beyond that is a robot controlled spray painting chamber to make the models look real. The look is sparse and industrial with metallic gray decor. Leaves from the trees outside cast moving patterns of light and shadows on the tinted windows. Techno and jazz play in the background. Almost every day when Jobs was healthy and in the office, he would have lunch with Ive and then wander by the studio in the afternoon. As he entered, he would survey the tables and see the products in the pipeline, sense how they fit into Apple strategy, and inspect with his fingertips the evolving design of each. Usually it was just the two of them alone, while the other designers glanced up from their work but kept a respectful distance. If Jobs had a specific issue, he might call over the head of mechanical design or another of Ives' deputies. Deputies, if something excited him or sparked some thoughts about corporate strategy, he might ask the chief operating officer Tim Cook or the marketing head Phil Schiller to come over and join them. I've described the usual process. This great room is the one place in the company where you can look around and see everything we have in the works. When Steve comes in, he will sit at one of these tables. If we're working on a new iPhone, for example, he might grab a stool and start playing with different models and feeling them in his hands, or marking on which ones he likes best. Then he will graze by the other tables, just him and me, to see where all the other products are heading. He can get a he can get a sense of the sweep of he can get a sense of the sweep of the whole company, the iPhone and iPad, the iMac and laptop, and everything else we're considering. That helps him see where the company is spending its energy and how things connect. And he can ask, does this thing make sense? Because over here is where we are growing a lot, or questions like that. He gets to see things in relationship to each other, which is pretty hard to do in a big company. Looking at the models on these tables, he can see the future for the next 3 years. Much of the design process is a conversation, a back and forth as we walk around the tables and play with the models. He doesn't like to read complex drawings. He wants to see and feel a model. He's right. I get surprised when we make a model and then realize it's rubbish, even though based on the CAD, computer aided design renderings, it looked great. He loves coming in here because it's calm and gentle. It's a paradise if you're a visual person. There are no formal design reviews, so there are no huge decision points. Instead, we can make the decisions fluid. Since we iterate every day and never have dumbass presentations, we don't run into major disagreements. On this day, I was overseeing the creation of a new European power plug and connector for the Macintosh. Dozens of foam models, each with the tiniest variation, have been cast and painted for inspection. Some would find it odd that the head of design would fret over something like this, but Jobs got involved as well. Ever since he had a special power supply made for the Apple II, Jobs has cared about not only the engineering also the also the design of such parts. His name is listed on the patent for the white power brick used by the MacBook, as its magnet connector with its satisfying click. In fact, he is listed as one of the inventors of for 212 different Apple patents in the United States as the beginning of 2011. Ivan Jobs have been obsessed over and patented the packaging for various Apple products. U.S. Patent D558572, for example, granted on January 1, 2008, is for the iPod Nano box, with four drawings showing how the device is nestled in a cradle when the box is open. Patent D596485, issued on July 21, 2009, is for the iPhone packaging, with a sturdy lid and little glossy plastic tray inside. Early on, Mike Mercula had taught Jobs to understand that people do judge a book by its cover, and therefore to make sure all the trappings and packaging of Apple signaled that there was a beautiful gem inside. Whether it's an iPod mini or a MacBook Pro, Apple customers know the feeling of opening up the well-crafted box and finding the product nestled in an inviting fashion. Steve and I spent a lot of time on the packaging, said Ive. I love the process of unpacking something. You design a ritual of unpacking to make the product feel special. Packaging can be theater. It can create a story. Ive, who has the sensitive temperament of an artist, at times got upset with Jobs for taking too much credit, a habit that has bothered other colleagues over the years. His personal feelings for Jobs were so intense that at times he got easily bruised. He would go through a process of looking at my ideas and say, "That's no good. That's not very good. I like that one," I've said. And later I would be sitting in the audience and he would be talking about it as if it was his idea. I pay maniacal attention to where an idea comes from, and I even kept notebooks filled with my ideas. So it hurts when he takes credit for one of my designs. I've also has bristled when outsiders portray Jobs as the only ideas guy at Apple. That makes us vulnerable as a company, I've said, earnestly, his voice soft. But then he paused to recognize the role Jobs in fact played. In so many other companies, ideas and great designs get lost in the process, he said. The ideas that come from me and my team would have been completely irrelevant nowhere if Steve hadn't been here to push us, work with us, and drive through all the resistance to turn our ideas into products. Boom. Chapter 26. Check. Um, cool. And to answer that question of if um like how much success is actually like design, I probably give it like a 70% chance. Cause what I heard like just from reading that part was like three things. First was the focus. Like that was a big part of it. Like focusing on making great products instead of trying to make great money. You make the product, the money will fix itself. So that was the first thing. Second thing was gonna be that second thing was dang, what was the second thing? Oh yeah, so first thing was just yeah, focusing on making great products instead of trying to make that great money. And then also flipping that process that they had when Jobs was there the first time. Um, the process of having the designers design and then giving it to the engineers instead of having engineers and then have the engineers design and then have the designers try to design around the engineers. Um, yeah, and then really just focusing on that customer experience. Going there, like getting in touch with the different products that they're making and getting feedback and simplifying. That was the second one I was thinking about. Making sure that they can simplify as much as they can. That was the process that kind of, I would say, probably amounted for about like 80% of their success. Um, so to answer that question, I say that 80%, 85% of success is actually design. That's what I would say personally. If you think differently, comment down below. Other than that, this was day 29 of becoming more well read. We'll see you back for day 30.